Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and today I'm talking with Jafar Soltani. He's a lead software engineer at Rare out of the UK. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm lovely. So you've been at Rare for a while now, 10 years it looks like.
Yeah, I joined Rare January 2008, which is almost 10 years now.
How many games have you worked on in 10 years?
Oh, wow. Probably 5 or 6 games.
Wow. So games take years, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not by no means I'm one of the oldest people here. Like, we have people who've been here since the beginning, like 25 or even longer than that, 25 years or more.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
So, yeah, they've seen everything. They've seen, like, from the old times until now.
Mm-hmm. What is a AAA game? I hear that term all the time when I read, game journalism.
So AAA games are the games that you usually make for consoles. You can obviously make them for PC as well. And they are the ones that really push the limit in terms of technology. Graphics is the main one. So it's very important. The performance of the game is very important. So there's a lot of optimization going on, and people try to basically make the best thing possible. It kind of turns into an art as opposed to like just a product that you release, because people are really proud of it when they release it, and they want to show to the players the best version possible.
How many people will work on a game like that? What are you working on right now?
So we are working on Sea of Thieves for Xbox One and Xbox One X and PC. But over the years, a number of people working on these games have increased massively. Right now, I think for us, we have about 150 people working on this.
Oh, my.
I mean, working on it for about 3 years.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's been a long journey.
That must be hard, because I know that they announced Sea of Thieves with like a big announcement and big videos and everything. And for basically 2 years and 6 months before that, you're working on it quietly without telling anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's a joy, but it's also very hard because you can't really tell other people, and your friends might be asking you. It's very hard not to tell them very much about the game. Mm-hmm. But with this game, the difference is that we are as opposed to doing one big release at the end, which is the main characteristic of these AAA games. Mm-hmm. We have been releasing it to we call it retail environment, the equivalent of production environment, for over 2 years. But at the beginning, it was just people at Rare who were playing the games at home.
Ah, okay. So rather than kind of a traditional waterfall where, like you say, there's a big release and then maybe some patches afterwards, you're using continuous delivery on a AAA video game.
That's what we are trying to do, yes. And it is very hard and it takes time.
Interesting. Well, let me back up to some of the basics. You have 150 people working in this. You have artists and musicians, and you have build engineers, and you have core engine engineer, all different flavors of engineers. Do they open up Visual Studio and build the thing, and it's like one giant project, or is it 100 different projects? How does it get built, and can I build it on my laptop?
So, yeah, this is a very good question. Yes, they all have to build the game. It's generally because it's written in C++, as opposed to like Java or C# or other higher level languages. It is written in C++ as one big project. So, and it takes a long time to compile. So you need to have powerful PCs to build the game. and it takes a while. And these are part of the challenges, because at the same time, people want to get fast feedback about making a change. But at the same time, it takes a long time to compile, for instance. So there are a lot of challenges in developing games that you rarely see when you're developing, let's say, web applications or other types of applications that are a lot smaller.
Is the primary challenge that it is so big, or is the primary challenge that it's in C++ and you have to think about memory leaks, or is that a thing of the past?
No, definitely. Like you have to think about all of them. There are many challenges. We can go through them, but just to give you some examples, like compiling in C++ is obviously reducing the time is one of the biggest challenges. Also, the games are quite big, like multi gigabytes. Like there are games that are out now, for instance, on Xbox One, that are about 100 gigabyte.
Oh my!
So imagine you want to build this and just transfer this around. Like we have a build farm that tries to make the package, build the game, make a package, run some tests on it, and we can't just have one machine doing all of it. So we try to parallelize some of this work, but obviously this means that we have to transfer these packages across. And sometimes it's even faster to do the work on one machine as opposed to parallelizing it. So these are all the challenges there.
Okay. Well, when you say build, though, I think it's different with a game, because the idea, like there's the C++ code. You're not compiling 100 gigabytes of code. You've got cutscenes, you've got renders, you've got multiple, got textures. Like building is more than just code, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. Yes. Sorry. And like if you want to kind of think about it, maybe the executable, that is basically the code, is about maybe 100 to 150 megabyte. Mm-hmm. Which is basically less than 1% of the total size. The rest are audio files, the sound, the music, the effects, the videos, as you said, and just general art assets like textures and all of the animation, all of this other stuff. Those are the ones that take the biggest amount of space, and we need to convert them from, like, let's say they are being developed or authored in, let's say, 3D Studio Max or Maya or these other similar tools. But we can't just run them with that format on the console. So we need to convert them to a format that can be played and displayed on a console. So there's a lot of work there as well.
Okay.
And that actually takes longer than compiling.
Ah, okay. Can you optimize that so that the person locally is only just doing the delta? Like if I change one line of code, do I hit Control-Shift-B and then come back tomorrow?
No, definitely. These are the things that we try to optimize. Because if you think about it, like when the game reaches that scale, what you're working on is probably 1% or even less than that. So it doesn't make sense for you to have to generate the whole 100% if you're just making 1% change to that thing. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's plenty of opportunity to try to optimize for different things.
Is the best way when you have something that big where you're trying to create a game package that represents this monolithic application, and the game package, I assume, consists of the C++ code, the art, the audio and video content, to decide that no one will build it locally, that you should use the build farm only? Or does the concept of a local build go away when you're making something this big?
People still have to build local, especially programmers, because they're making changes to the game, so they need to compile it again. Let's say they're making changes to how we render the game, so they need to compile it again. Whereas for artists, they can use the latest version that were built by our build farm, let's say, and they can just use that. So for them, it's less of an issue. Hopefully, most of the times, they would use the output that are generated from the build farm. But sometimes, like when you're making changes to assets, you need some code that goes along with that. Because let's say you change the format for some certain asset, so you need the code. You can't use an older version of the code, otherwise it doesn't understand the format.
How did people do this before you start doing continuous delivery? Before you build a build farm, I know that there were render farms and things to handle the huge amount of assets, but when someone built the gold master version, was it just built on like Anna's laptop, and then that's where we burn the CD off of her laptop, and that's the official game?
Yes, that's believe it or not, that's how it used to be. And when I started working here, that was exactly that. Like we had our build farm was one or maybe two PCs, and it was taking like people were not even bothered making multiple builds a day. They were just making a build. Like there was a concept of nightly build that basically you accumulate all the changes throughout the day and then you build it overnight. And by following day, you'd see maybe it didn't work and you have to go back and try to fix them. And in the meantime, you accumulated a lot of changes at the same time. So, but now to compare that to now, we have our build farm is about 100 PCs, and they all are like physical PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite beefy, like with 40 cores and SSD. So it is like...
I'm sorry, did you say 40 cores?
40 cores, yes. 2 CPUs, 40 cores. Yeah, I mean, with 64 gigabyte of memory and with 1 terabyte of SSD and NVMe drive. So they are quite beefy.
Oh, wow. That's no joke.
Yeah, and we are still struggling. Like we are still like, because basically the problem is that people want to, what we promote for people to do is to work with small batches, and by that I mean like small work in small increments. So make a few tweaks, submit that, get fast feedback on that, make another change. So the faster you can process these changes, the more changes they're going to throw at you. So it's basically a constant battle.
Now
you're going to basically fill in the 100, like with 100 is fine for a while, and then people change their approach. They throw more changes at it, and then 100 is not enough anymore. You have to increase that.
Oh, wow. Well, the goal with continuous delivery, as I understand it, is that the thing you are continuously delivering needs to always be shippable.
That's right.
It just needs to be some level of quality. So right now, it's a random Tuesday that we're talking. You should be able to ship it right now.
That's right.
It would not be 1.0, but you could ship it today, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and that's definitely our plan, and that's what we have been trying to do. Is every day we would have a release candidate, and at the moment, what we do is we release weekly. So, and when we get to release, we should have, in theory, 5 candidates that we choose from. We say which one do we want to ship. But I mean, in practice, sometimes like incident happens. For instance, people might make mistakes, or due to some other problems, you may not get a candidate. And in those situations, we call these incidents, and we don't let any other changes to go in when something like this happens. So we basically lock our depot. We prevent anybody making further changes, because potentially they can make the situation worse by adding more on top of that, introducing new failures. So we basically block everybody from committing back until we resolve that issue. We make sure that we are shippable again. And once we have a candidate, then we let other people to carry on working.
When you said that you have 5 candidates, is it the last 5 good builds and then you just pick one?
That's right. So every day you have one candidate, and like because we're releasing weekly, so we get 5 candidates within that period at the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm. I think people who are listening might have developed with continuous delivery and continuous integration. You know, they may have done that in the last 3, 4, 5 years. Some people may have been doing it as long as 10 or 15 years ago. When I was in banking, we had introduced continuous delivery around 12 to 15 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Why aren't games doing this today? Why is this a new thing for AAA video games?
That's a good question.
Is it cultural?
There are different reasons. I think that's probably one of them as well. Generally, I mean, one of the problems is like people are not feeling comfortable releasing a game that isn't complete, because it's a work in progress. So even for us, like changing our mindset to say, is this like a good, like arguing over what's an acceptable quality? Because if you want to polish everything from the day one, you would not have many features in the game, because you spend a lot of time polishing a lot of stuff. So understanding what's an accepted level of quality is very hard, especially when there aren't many features in the game already as a way to comparing it against. So that's one of the reasons that people tend to not show their progress until the end, when they're like super proud of it. Mm-hmm. So that's one reason. And also the change we are making here is because the game Sea of Thieves is supposed to be game as a service, which means like, as opposed to doing one big release and maybe a few patches, the idea is that this would run for many years. and you get feedback from players and you iterate over them. So sometimes if you don't really, I'm not saying that you don't care about the feedback, but if like that's not the model you want to work with, then there are less reasons for you to try to adopt continuous delivery. Although I would disagree with that, because like there are other benefits, such as you don't necessarily crunch. That's one of the biggest problems with video games. Usually towards the end, the last 4 months to shipping the game, like people work crazy hours. There are a lot of like overtime, there are a lot of crunches, and people work over the weekend, and people get stressed a lot, and people burn out. I mean, this has been mentioned a lot in the past. So, and that was just one of the other reasons that we didn't want this to be the case, because we know that this, like, if you want to have happier developers, you can't keep like crunching. Especially imagine if you want to release regularly and for each one you want to crunch. That's not very sustainable.
So that term crunch, that we've all, I mean, I've had, we call them like death marches, or, you know, heroic efforts and things like that. Why has crunch become a part of gaming development culture? And is this a direct response to trying to stop that? Because you've been doing this 10 years and you seem like you're not burned out. So I'm hoping hoping it's working out. Not crunching seems like a good thing for everybody, right? Work-life balance matters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have crunched a lot on the previous projects, but not on this one. Luckily, over the last 3 years, and not many people really have crunched on this project, which is a really good thing. We're really proud of that. But I think the reason is because a lot of times you hire maybe graduates or people who are fairly junior, and they are really passionate. So they want to spend all their time trying to produce the best possible outcome they can. And it's a more matter of pride. And also sometimes like there are some hard deadlines that you have to meet, unfortunately. Like the game needs to be out, let's say by this time in the year, like in November, let's say. So it's very hard to miss that deadline. So that's why, and if you don't plan quite well, then you have a lot of work left to do still. That's why people stay late and do extra work.
Okay. And now that you've been on this for 3 years, was it continuous delivery the whole time? Or did you all start with this saying like, all right, someone's going to say file new project and Jafar is going to work with his team and make sure that builds and we're going to deliver it all the time? Or wasn't there an initial, was there an initial crunch to get it to a buildable state before you got into the groove of continuous delivery?
That's a good question. So when we actually tried to start practicing continuous delivery on the previous project, but we didn't obviously manage to do that. There are certain aspects that we definitely tried on the previous project. For instance, we work on it's called trunk-based development, or basically everybody work in one single branch. So we don't branch off for release, or people don't work the different features on different branches. We just work on one branch. So we were practicing that on the previous project. So we are using a lot of foundations we built over time. But on this project, from day one, we started with continuous delivery in mind. And what really helped us with, because one pressure you get with games is you need to still show progress. And with continuous delivery, you need to build a lot of foundations in place. Like, for instance, we were writing our testing framework to begin with, or setting up our deployment pipeline to begin with, as opposed to developing new features, or figuring how to write test code that can be tested well. But so it was very hard to try to show progress whilst you're building a lot of these foundations. So what we did was we used a completely different engine to write our prototype that then we can then demo that to other people, and that was almost like a throwaway code. We were not trying to develop that with continuous delivery mindset at all. So that lift a lot of pressure off the development team, so they can build all these foundations and pipeline whilst we were trying to answer a lot of questions from the design perspective, especially with the prototype, because it's very hard to do both at the same time. That's what we found.
So let me get into some of the nitty gritty, because I understand the code bits of this. I less understand the asset management aspect. Are you using Git, or where are you putting your code?
So we are using Perforce.
Perforce. Okay.
Yeah, so we can't use Git, unfortunately. And when we evaluating different source control systems, the main problem we had with Git at that point was that it wasn't very good with large binary files. And also the other problem is like with binary files, which are the art assets mainly, you can't really merge them. It's not like code that I change one function, you change another function, we just merge these two together. With binary files, you basically override the other person. So you need to usually lock these files to make sure nobody else is touching this file as you're editing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, and that doesn't work well with the Git and distributed model. And we found that generally Perforce was a better option. And a lot of AAA games are using Perforce or other centralized source control systems.
Okay. And
all the assets and code, they all are in the single branch, as I mentioned. So, because like in the past, we used different models where you have a separate branch for instance, for assets, different branch for code. But it's a lot simpler if you are working in a single branch.
Okay. So even though there are solutions in Git to allow you to have like pointers to large files and different things like that, like the being able to lock things down is an important feature.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And maybe, I mean, I haven't looked at Git for the last couple of years, but maybe I'm wrong now. And like it has been improved a lot. But what I would say is probably in 6 to 9 months from now, we would evaluate again and see how it is. But it obviously would be a difficult challenge to move a project already
course,
in 4 years and change the source control systems for that. So.
Well, yeah, and you're making a decision. This is about a decision you made 3 or 4 years ago when you start off. You don't exactly switch systems halfway.
That's right, yeah.
And then what is the build server? Like, is that a build server of your own making, or is it something like TeamCity or VSTS?
Yeah, so we are actually using TeamCity.
Mm-hmm.
We used TeamCity on the previous project as well, and prior to that, we had our own system. We developed it when we used to have 1 or 2 build agents. We had our own system, but when we started the previous project, we decided to not use that system and just go with TeamCity.
And did you have to make custom? I mean, is TeamCity smart about games, or is this just going out to command line applications that go and do the rendering or the squishing of images or the compression or whatever, asset specific things you have to do? Is it dealing with that, or is it only concerning itself with C++?
Yeah, so TeamCity doesn't provide much support for games, so we have to do a lot of the work ourselves. And for instance, you have, as you said, you run a process, and that will either return an exit code 0 or 1. If it's, let's say, if everything's good, it returns exit code 0, which TeamCity knows. That means everything's good, that passed. But it doesn't know the detail about that, so you have to provide a lot of information back to TeamCity. And again, with games, like what we find is like we hit some limits that even like with TeamCity is hard, and sometimes you have to work around some limitations with TeamCity as well. To give you some examples, for instance, we generate about between 8 to 10 terabyte of just build artifacts per day. And just having that storage and clean up that storage, because we basically need to, otherwise we're going to burn through a lot of storage. So we have to clean them up quite regularly. Mm-hmm. And just as a simple case, for instance, there isn't really a very complicated cleanup that would serve our needs in TeamCity, so we have to come up with some solutions of our own.
Okay, and those are in the form of plugins or extensions to TeamCity that play with TeamCity, but do specific things that you need them to do.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
that's correct. Yeah.
And you said that now you've got this tuned to the point where you're releasing every day and really good candidates every week.
Sorry, no. So we have good candidates every day, and we release every
day.
Week.
Okay, so you release every week, but you could potentially release at any moment.
That's right. That every day, and the important thing is that what we do here is like making sure that, like, because one of the challenges with like releasing regularly is obviously like players would have to keep downloading and installing. Is not like seamless, such as a website, updating a website behind the scene. Like every time you release a new version, especially on a console, like players have to update, otherwise they can't play the game. So you can't really, like, you don't want to be the case when, like, every time somebody tries to play your game, they have to spend time downloading, I don't know, gigabytes of data.
Well, how do you solve that? I mean, I'm not familiar with. I mean, I have an Xbox, and of course, it updates all the time. Is it updating deltas? Are we just sending diffs down, or do you have a technique where you can go around the existing system and update within the game itself?
So no, definitely. We are relying on the platform and the delivery mechanism that is diffing what you have with what is available.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if you don't turn on your Xbox and you don't update for, like, let's say a month, you're only going to get the delta between what you have and what's out there, as opposed to getting each of the releases that we have done over that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing we are working on right now as well is to make sure that you only get what has been changed, which means that like if the assets, let's say, they haven't changed, you shouldn't really have to download that again. Otherwise, you will lose all your bandwidth, because some people have limits on how much they can download, for instance, in a month. And we can easily consume all of that if you're not careful. I mean, I have to say, though, with our game, when we are still not at the 100 gigabyte stage yet. We are about 15 to 20 gigabyte right now, but that's where we expect to be. And the 100 gigabyte figure is from, like, other AAA titles such as Forza.
Sure. Well, certainly when 4K starts happening, your code might not necessarily get bigger, but your assets are going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's nuts. And when you release, are you doing the diffs? Like, let's say that there's versions 0.1 and 0.2 and all the way up through 1.0. Does the platform take care of the diffs, or do you have to build the diffs and then ship each individual diff to go from 0.1 to 1.0 and 0.3 to 1.0?
No, luckily the platform takes care of that.
Okay, so you ship the final 20 gigs or the 15 gigs.
That's right, yes.
And they figure out all the diffs.
Yeah, exactly, which is great, because we don't have to worry about that.
Does that mean that a store-based system, like, an app store or a game store, like the platform provides you on Xbox or the App Store on iPhone, really lends itself to continuous delivery? I mean, if you can take updates every week as a user, and the App Store will handle the diffs and the store will worry about getting everyone up to date, that's a nice benefit that fits very well with your goal, which is a quality game all the time that is constantly updated.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Yes, it is. Although I have to say, with these kind of platforms that you have to release through them, they have a certification process normally. Mm-hmm. And because obviously they want to protect their platform. They want to make sure the games, let's say, that are released on Xbox have certain quality to maintain the reputation of that platform. Mm-hmm. So that could be a bottleneck here, because if you imagine, like, because traditionally for games that's up to 2 weeks, because they want to test everything in the game. They want to make sure the game doesn't crash, for instance, and they have some metrics like how long it takes between crashes, that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
But given we are part of Microsoft and we have been doing this for 2 years, we have a really good relationship with the certification team within Microsoft, and our cert is nowhere near 2 weeks, is a lot less.
Okay.
That's how we can release weekly.
I see. So you work out a relationship with the owners of whatever app store you're sending to, and they start to realize, oh, this is good quality. They'll test it differently. But it sounds like it's another whole build system that you don't have visibility into. And they're doing a kind of testing themselves.
Yes, to some extent, but over the last year or so, they've evolved their approach, which is really good. So, as opposed to trying to prevent a lot of problems, they kind of when they trust like a company or like a game or a title or developers, what they do is they are less restrictive, but they have a lot of metrics that they look at, so they can see, for instance, how a game behaves, like if it's crashy a lot, that kind of stuff. And if it turns out that these developers are not careful anymore, they would put more pressure and put more checks to make sure they maintain the quality.
Okay, interesting. But you haven't found that releasing to the store has been a big issue?
No, we've been quite lucky that they've been working well with us in that sense, and they evolved their process to support this.
Mm-hmm. And you said that at the beginning you're releasing this on Xbox One X, which is, it's a console. It's like micro generation or a minor generation, and it's a big deal because it's got 4K. Mine shows up in the mail today.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, thanks. So I don't know if we can call it another. Is it another build target?
No.
Or is it the same binary? Like, is this actually? That's a good question. You also release to Windows. Do you release one thing or do you release 3 things?
So that's a good question. No, actually, we compile. So Xbox One and Xbox One X, we use the same compiler for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the output from the code isn't really different. The main difference is the asset, and as you say, the 4K assets that you want to deliver to Xbox One X audience. Mm-hmm. But with PC, we have to compile the PC separately. So we basically have to compile for 2 platforms in this scenario.
Okay. So you are releasing 2 separate things, but that's code, the underlying code, like you said, it's a universal platform. So it's not, is it a big deal, or is it just about what the user sees, or what's the difference between an Xbox version and a...
So it's at the core, there isn't much of a difference, but for instance, networking layer is different as an example. And graphics again is different, because like for PC you can have different graphics card and different drivers. So
right.
The parts of the game that touches the hardware are different, whereas the core, there's a logic of the game, that kind of stuff, they're identical. It doesn't really matter.
All right. When is this coming out? You're shipping every week, but when do I get it every week?
So we have a technical alpha program that people can come and play. We have a really good community. I don't know exact numbers, but I think over 100,000 people signed up to that program, and they can play the game regularly. We had one session over the weekend, but they are under NDA, so they can't really talk much about the game. But we are hoping to reduce that restriction fairly soon. And it would be, as you mentioned, it would be in 2018 when the game would be out for public. So hopefully more people would be able to play. But what I would say is, if anybody's interested, they can sign up to the technical alpha program that we have for Sea of Thieves and hopefully get a chance to play the game.
Very cool. Thank you so much for letting us see behind the curtain and how you're going to be building that game.
No worries at all. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great fun.
Absolute pleasure. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.